So our brains are neuroplastic, aren't they? We know the neurology in our brains is bendable, moldable, which is one of the reasons why tech, the dark side of tech, is it does change the way that your brains are. But in a positive, if it changes the way that your brains are, you're going to look at problems and situations from a different perspective. You're going to see different things. So, like, I guess if you could take it from a care perspective, a tech platform, you're going to be able to drill deeper into it and to see patterns and to see trends that we, in our own human experience, are not necessarily going to be able to see quickly, or might take me a week to sit there. So, say for example, I put my hat on from donkeys years ago of going and doing an investigation. If I could put in what I needed to find into a tech platform and think differently with an open-minded perspective, a growth mind perspective of how can I achieve this in a different way, the platform might be able to, with some prompts, drill down and get the information quicker than I would if I had to sit there and read 7 days worth of daily records and then cross-reference that to risk assessments and cross-reference that to rotas and this and that and the other. So by having a growth mindset, a mindset of expansion, of where could I be if I did this? What's the goal after the goal? What's the, I'm open to what other options are there? It enables me to get maybe a greater outcome and quicker, and probably a more realistic one, where it's not necessarily biased by my own model of the world.
Hello and welcome to Health Automated, the podcast where we explore the fascinating world of social care, technology, all things well-being, sprinkled with a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Lee Truman, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. So joining me today are my incredible co-hosts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussions. First up, we have Jack White, not from the White Stripes. He won't ring your doorbell, but he will develop some great AI tech. How are we doing today, Jack? You all right?
Yeah, not too bad. Still bald.
Yeah, it doesn't change, mate. I've got a few years on you. Yeah, it's not going to change. With him, we've got the man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Mark Tops, so regional business manager for Essex Care and co-founder for the amazing Care Review that you can catch every Tuesday. Make sure you tune in. Mark, delighted to have you with us. How are we doing today?
Yes, not too bad, thank you. Still with hair at the moment, so
yes.
Damn you.
That's going to be the fame, isn't it? People just telling us about their hair status, like we're not doing a video podcast. So awesome.
And we're also very lucky today to be joined by an amazing guest. So we've got Lucy Buxton. Now, Lucy is from LGB Coach Consultancy. She's an independent coach. She helps individuals and professionals achieve mental clarity, solve the challenges that keep them awake at night without risking burnout and getting overwhelmed. She often shows people how to go from feeling lost and overwhelmed to being clear and empowered.
Lucy is amazing. I'm going to throw over to her just to introduce her a little bit.
Oh gosh, what does a girl say after that introduction? He hasn't even said who Lucy is.
Everyone knows who Lucy is.
Just like Lucy, it could be, I could just pretend to be any Lucy, couldn't I? I think I might. Actually, if I chat away enough, people that know me will know it's me, won't they? Because, I can actually ring somebody and people just know it's me without me even saying it's me. So I could just leave it at this and it might be quite amusing, mightn't it?
Yeah. Everyone knows Lucy. Everyone knows
Lucy. So, yeah. Lucy?
Yeah, I'm just Lucy.
It's Lucy with the hair.
Actually, I was thinking, and I don't know whether I should say this, if I had my hair cut, I'd have enough hair to be able to give it to Jack.
Oh, do you know what? That'd be really, really nice, because this time of year I've really noticed it. Some would say I'm follically challenged at this moment in time. But I like your background.
Yeah, well, I was admiring yours, and you kind of, I went down this rabbit hole, didn't I? But I went with the nice green and tranquil and,
Lee's just being boring, not jazzing it up today.
Yeah, I need to get myself on one of these backgrounds for next time, I think. You'll have to get maybe a Health Automated one branded. I'll be good in logos
just a
needs to be in the
little bit
corner.
of ad placement to see if it can get past, that critical faculty and get into the subconscious,
Yeah,
But
I
ad
need to
placement.
get a Health Automated cup as well. Missing branding opportunities there. Branding opportunities. So yeah, we always like to start with good and bad. So or as we got Lucy here, good and not so good. I will start with. Let's start with Mark. What's gone good? What's gone well, and what's gone not so well?
What's gone well? Well, I had parents' evening this week, so my children changed schools in September, so all three of them moved, which was a big move for all of them. Kind of worried about that they had very good friendship groups and how they would cope, but no, really good reviews from the teachers and how they're settling in, which is nice.
Awesome. Jack.
So it was my eldest's birthday, so I've officially got an 11-year-old daughter now. So she's actually quite a chilled child, in all fairness, has her moments. But I've got daddy duty this weekend, going out shopping, spending them gift cards, and probably getting coaxed into buying a few more other bits to fit that massive wardrobe that I already barely can close. Not so good stuff, to be fair. The only thing I can think of, the weather. It's been absolutely miserable. I know me and Lee were meant to be going to a meeting on Monday, and yeah, I think Lee got flooded in. I travelled about 100 odd miles and had to turn around, so that was fun. But that's pretty much it. It's pretty much been all positive this week.
Awesome, that's what we like to hear. So before I pass over to Lucy, I think so for me, it was Monday morning. It was going to an on-site visit, so I'm in Somerset, Yeovil to be specific. There's two ways out of Yeovil because it's a one-horse town. Sometimes that one horse isn't even in Yeovil. Sometimes it's in another Somerset town. So turned right to go onto the 303, which would get me to Worthing. Went through a few deep puddles, and then I come across what could be described as a river. I couldn't see the end of it. It was just water. It was like, I don't know how deep that goes, so I'm going to turn around and go home. So that was a bit frustrating, but other than that, week's been really good. So again, got some new customers coming on board, had some great conversations with new partners as well. So yeah, really good week. Lucy, what's gone well for you and what's been not so good?
Not sure quite how to answer this one, because I don't kind of see it either way. I've had an odd week.
Yeah.
A week that, I could sit here and say and tell you about my week and you'd immediately go, oh my God, that's terrible. Because actually, I rang my dad a few nights ago and he turned out to not be being well. And I dashed over there, to which he had a bit of an episode in front of me, which with my old nursing hat on, I was a bit worried. But he after a cup of tea and a bit of a chat, he was all right, and he wouldn't let me ring an ambulance. So the next morning I took him to the GP, of which he had one of those moments in front of the GP, and we then spent the rest of the day in a cardiac emergency care unit. So you could say I've not had a good week. However, I've actually had a really good week despite all of that, and I've had a really stinky cold. Life has just happened, and I think that's the thing. I don't look at it as good or bad. I sit in the middle and I go with the flow.
Yeah.
And
That's
I think
good
that's
way.
a really good way to be, because if I can do that, I can just roll with those things that happen in life. I spoke to my dad on the phone and his words were, I don't know if I'm having a heart attack. I think I'll wait to see and speak to the doctor in the morning. And I went, Dad, if you wait to speak to the doctor in the morning, you might not be speaking to the doctor in the morning. And it's in that moment, if I can be in the flow and I can control me, then it's neither good nor bad, and we can get the right outcome that we want.
Yeah.
So there you go. I'm not sure that answered the question in the way that you wanted me to.
It didn't, but it was even better. It was even better. But it is right that we kind of need to control these circumstances so they're no bit either good or bad. It's just day to day. It's just life.
It's just stuff that happens. And had I have got into a tizzy bozzy and ended up worrying and stressing, what would that have done to my dad? It wouldn't have helped anything, would it? And it certainly wouldn't have helped this young GP that, as I'm in the surgery with my dad in the room, and my dad's going paler and paler, and this poor young GP's going, oh, and I'm like, you're all right, Dad, come on, sit up, take a breath, you'll be fine. You know, it's not going to help if I lose my stuff, is it?
No, just make it worse. Just make a difficult situation even harder. So,
and I'd be sitting here going, oh my God, I've had a terrible week, it's been awful, and I'm not.
Yeah, which is why you're the perfect guest to talk about the topic this week. So the topic this week is digital mindset, harnessing tech for personal growth. So we're going to explore the fascinating intersection of technology, human psychology. As we all know, in today's fast-paced digital world, our relationship with technology is deeply influences our mindset, productivity, and overall well-being. So we're going to have a look into this today. So discussion points. So we're going to start off with, how is the rapid advancement of technology influence our mental health, and what strategies can we adopt to maintain a healthy balance between digital engagement and personal well-being? Really, really interested in this one as well with my mental health hat on. So does anyone want to jump in first by a show of hands?
Yeah, I'll go on this one. There we go. So I feel that society is in a very exciting time with technology. And the reason I say that is because we are on that curve where over the next sort of 20, 30 years, we are going to see more and more advancements, not just in social care, but in society and the world. So I personally believe, I know we was discussing briefly beforehand, that within the next sort of 50 odd years, we'll definitely be interplanetary species, should we say, with what we're seeing. So technology is advancing in so many ways, and society is at a stage where it's having to try and keep up with some of this because we risk being left behind, you know. And when we look at how it's influencing us, it has positive and negative influences. So the positives being, you know, if I want to communicate with someone, I can, compared to 200 years ago with a script and a carrier pigeon, you know. Same as I can video call people, I can even have chill time and unwind on the sofa just scrolling through pointless videos that make me happy. But there's where some of the negatives come in as well, because we're starting to see a big divide. Now, I'm not sure if you've been to a restaurant lately and you'll see a family out for a meal, but it's not your conventional family meal in most cases. You know, everyone's buried into some form of device, or you're not getting the full engagement. And where kids are being exposed to tech from a young age, which is great for things like education, it can also be damaging to development in other ways. I mean, how many children do we see now with complexes about their appearance, or always wanting to be up with the latest trends? So this is where some of the negatives can come with it. And I find that society's at a point where we're trying to balance this now, because obviously we're being more responsive to things like online abuse and as well as our online exploitation. But we find it hard sometimes where legislation and rules struggle to keep up with technical advances. And I feel when we look at how it's doing in general, I'd say there's probably a lot more positives when it comes to tech advancements than there is negatives, but society is still not fully there yet.
Awesome.
So I'm not sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. Not sure if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
Yeah. Lucy?
So I think there's loads in what you've said there. I think if you look at us as a species and you were to kind of draw a graph that looked at our evolution as a species, we're getting to the vertical. It's ridiculous. So we're either going to evolve to another level or we're going to implode. It's one of those. We're not going to implode. It's not happening. And we're going to evolve in ways that we have never thought before. So if you think about, so if I compare myself, to my dad. Bless him. He's born at the end of the war. He's 80. He hasn't got that thing called a mobile phone, and he doesn't do emails, which is much to the annoyance of the parish councillor chairman that lives next door, because he actually has to deliver like minutes in that thing called paper. You know, like he says to my dad, "Can I have your email?" And my dad will go, "What's one of those?" You know, it's quite funny. So if you look at how my dad is, and I can just about show him my mobile phone, and he's getting to scroll without actually just kind of completely coming out the page that he's on, to where we're at today, where I can put my son, who's like techie and animator and, you know, all kind of stuff, and he can just do something just really easy. The difference in those generations is incredible. So we know on a mind and a brain ability, we have massively evolved. We know that we've had massive changes in the last 2 years with AI, and then we've got ASI coming down the line, which is even greater. We're going through a process where people are like, I'm having to come to terms with the fact that this thing is going to be in my life. And a lot of people don't like it. Their ego's getting in the way. They're getting threatened. They're getting, oh my God, it's going to take my jobs, all this kind of stuff. No, it's not going to take your jobs. You've got to learn to use it as a tool to be able to increase your output, right? It's a perfect example. This morning, I jump onto my favorite AI friend, and I said to it, this platform that I'm on wants me to reduce down the amount of characters in this profile. And you know what? I was not sitting there and wasting my time counting all the letters and all the spaces. I ain't got the time for none of that. I ain't got the brain power or the energy. So I immediately went to AI to say, could you do this for me? And the job was done. That's where I think we're going to see some really useful improvements. However, what I would say is that we really need to balance this. Now, for those that know me, I don't just coach adults, I coach kids, I coach teens, and I see it so much. And one of the things that is really evident is that you've got parents going, oh God, little Billy's on his phone all the time. I can't get him off it. Da, 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 da. He's always talking to his mates on his phone. Yeah, well, that's how they talk. That's how they communicate. Challenge we've got is that different generations don't understand how the next generation communicates. And we're having to get our head around that. And then there is the implication on a chemical basis about how the exposure to lots of technology and the way that platforms are built, they either put your brain into trance and they impact the amount of dopamine in your receptors have, so that they can't kind of like, have that process doesn't actually kind of continue to happen in the way that it was meant to when you use lots of tech and you're on lots of these apps that kind of draw you in. So I think we've got to get our head around it's here. It's not going anywhere. We're in the age of Aquarius. Pluto's moved in. It's doing its thing. Tech's coming down the line. I think there'll be fear around it. But I also think we've got to be clever and we've got to be empowered and look at how using tech can enable us to expand so that we can evolve even more. And yeah, I'm like Jack. We will be talking to species that are out there in the universe, because it would be just so small-minded of us to think that we are the only living beings in this place.
Yeah, it's quite egotistical. It's quite egotistical to think that we're the only species in this kind of like solar system universe. I've always found that when people like we're alone, it's quite egotistical to think that it's only us, we're the only people. And I think, just touching a few things before I bring Mark in, I think even though we're the most connected we've ever been, there's so many devices, there's so many apps, there's so many stuff where we can connect to everyone. There's still an epidemic of loneliness around our society. We've got people in care homes who don't have that connection with someone else because we're relying on devices. And I think things like Instagram and TikTok, I mean, we don't see them. They're not kind of like medically damaging for our youth, but how damaging is something like Instagram to let's say a 16, 17-year-old young girl who logs onto Instagram all the time and sees these like picture perfect pictures of everyone. How do you compete with that? So I do think the kind of the sum of the tech is quite damaging for us. Obviously, to flip it onto the other side, we've got mental health apps. So we've got things like BetterHelp. I don't know if anyone's seen BetterHelp, but it's where you can sort of get therapy on demand. While it might not be as perfect as having a kind of like constant therapist, it's another really good tool. So there are some good tools out there, but there's also some tools like you say, like Instagram and TikTok, that could be doing a world of damage that is not going to be diagnosed for another 20 years. I mean, and I think we talked about work-life balance before, but this is the fact that there's no playbook, there's no kind of like how the tech is now where we are kind of, because the generations before us, if they wanted to work from home, they had to take files or a typewriter, or they had to make this conscious effort to work from home. As long as we've got these with us, then we can work from home. So it's, yeah, there's definitely a lot there.
Very quick one.
You're right in what you say. I mean, you've just picked up your mobile phone, haven't you?
Yeah.
And the amount of clients I have where one of the things I have to get them to do is to not carry their mobile phone around with them. The amount of managers or directors or chief execs who I've actually said, you really don't need to take your phone to the toilet with you, because they fear so much not being there when that phone call rings. They're so attached to it, and then their brain's been conditioned and they've got beliefs and they don't want to let people down. And yeah, you're right. I think there's a light and a dark side to anything, and there certainly is with tech.
It's just
one
about
thing
finding.
One thing I feel that a lot of people don't consider is what they post now may come to haunt them in 20, 30 years' time, you know, and you get people posting all of these pictures of them doing silly things. And, you know, one day someone's going to go, oh, look at my nan when she was 18 years old. What was my nan doing? Let's go through her Instagram, you know. Oh, and then I feel that where society's struggling to keep up, obviously with these advances, we sometimes risk creating future damage from the way we act now. And I feel that some of that is just on a human level. You know, we all love the social media side of things. We love the likes, you know, but in the future, them likes can be damaging towards us, you know.
Yeah. Just like to bring Mark in. Mark, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, I think it's been a really good conversation around, and I've been making notes, and I think there are definitely pros and cons, and I think it is rapidly advancing quicker than kind of we can grapple with. Maybe not for you guys kind of in the tech world of things, but definitely for us regular folk in the non-tech side. I think it's great for kind of awareness, finding people in similar cases, connecting with people around the world that you might not necessarily have found. And, you know, I love a bit of scrolling through TikTok, and actually the amount of people that talk about their positive experience of awareness through a video they've watched, maybe somebody living with ADHD or bipolar that do something that other people find isn't the norm and they've always thought it was weird, but then they connect with somebody else who does it and then they understand the reasons why their brain is making them do that. So I think in terms of that, a really positive, but I think we've obviously, like you've already touched on, the negative side of the amount of screen time that actually we all consume. And I know Australia are looking at obviously banning social media for under 18s or under 16s. And I welcome that, because I think, like you spoke about earlier, you know, the likes of Instagram, that is a very much a platform of, I find it a very false economy of people's lives that actually the younger generation do go on and they compare themselves to. And you know, I look at my children, not so much my youngest, but definitely my eldest and my middle, you know, they're watching like these children that are 11, 12, applying vast amounts of makeup, believing that is the norm, and then wanting it themselves. But then you find yourself as a parent being like, why do you need makeup? And I think we're having those honest conversations a lot earlier on. But when you spoke around the generational difference, it'd be really interesting to see, like in the future, if you then did a study and compared the two, the mental health of the older generation that never spoke about it and the impact that had, versus maybe the mental health of the younger generation at the moment that are very aware, are very susceptible, and having those open conversations, and where that looks like. I think, Lee, you spoke around actually online meetings. I think sometimes that digital advancement that the pandemic pushed us to is a negative impact on our mental health. Because I know for me, I'm back to back to back to back 5 days a week. And even if I put a blocker in my diary, it's normally the first thing that is booked over. And I have to say to my staff, make sure you hold, like, if you want a lunch break, you need to make sure that you decline that team meeting invite, decline whatever it is that's coming in, because you need to make sure that you're taking a break. And if it's in your diary, people can see it and they need to learn to actually, support the fact that you've got a break, and they shouldn't be just booking it. And I think in terms of strategies, I think it's setting boundaries for all of us, personal boundaries. And I think sometimes we listen and say, we hear people saying, oh, you shouldn't be online for more than X amount of time at a time. I think it's personal to each of us, and I think we need to be aware of our own limitations and what we're consuming if it is on social media, because I might be impacted very differently than Lucy, than Jack, than you are, Lee. But I think we do need to try and move away and remember that we are all human, and that face-to-face element outside of the screen does exist. And I think listening to you, Lee, I wrote down, we are more connected than ever, but we're also more disconnected than ever.
Yeah. It's about how we're using that as well. It's just, it's such an interesting conversation, isn't it? I think we could spend probably the whole podcast just talking about that first one. But it's just, we've got such powerful tools, but I don't know if we're using them in the right way. It's all going to come out in the wash. I mean, we don't even know. I mean, we'll find out what damage these things are doing when we hold them so close to our face. I mean, that's still yet to be discovered, isn't it? But so
we're energetic beings, aren't they? And these things are giving off energy. And when you're on a screen with lots of other people, I mean, there's something really simple. This is really simple. So when we're on a computer screen or a mobile, we're in forward focused vision, which literally means that our brainwaves are faster. They're at the fastest our brainwaves are. We have stopped doing this thing called peripheral vision, which is where our brainwaves are slower. Now, for me, because I know how to intentionally use my peripheral vision, and it's a habit, it's something I can just do. If I'm on the screen, I make sure I'm in my peripheral vision, which keeps my brain slower. But people don't know how to do that. So if you're constantly looking forward in forward focus vision, your brain's faster, you're going to be more anxious, you're going to be more overwhelmed, you're going to be this, that, and the other. You said about social media for kids. I think this is a key point just to mention out of pure interest. I believe next month there's a date for Parliament to debate parents having access to social media accounts of their kids, which I think will be helpful. So whether that, and that was something like previous experience and how I came to be in my own business, my not being able to view my own daughter's social media content, which when I did, I was able to find that she'd been looking at things which were not helpful. So I think that'll be a positive step forward. I'm going to shut up now.
No, definitely. And I think just to finish on this one and move on to the next one, I read a quote or seen a quote recently that said that social media is proof that even for 1 second, everything was perfect. And that's the thing we need to keep in mind there. This isn't like an organic view of someone's life. This is a snapshot when everything's lined up. There's filters, there's, a staged picture. So moving on to the next question or the next discussion topic. So in what ways can technology be leveraged to cultivate a growth mindset, boost creativity in both personal and professional settings? This question seems like it's been written perfectly for Lucy, so I'm going to throw over to Lucy first.
Oh my goodness me, I'm feeling the pressure here. Okay, right, so growth mindset. As people, one of the reasons why we fear things and stuff is because it's change. We don't want to move from doing what we do, what's familiar. And if you have a growth mindset, you're open to other concepts. And tech actually enables you to expand how you do what you do, to see things differently. So say, for example, I could combine 3 different types of technology. Something that can learn about me, something that can listen, I can talk into, and then something that can design something. So 3 different platforms where I could literally write one social media post and it can create it into 3 different types for 3 different types of social media. So when I can think about combining different technological tools, I can get a greater outcome. I can achieve a goal I want to quicker than what I myself can do. Like, for me to sit there and do that, that would take me days, because my brain would be like, oh, I can't do this. But to use technology to leverage growth, it makes a difference. And also, I think using technology, it helps you kind of grow more. So our brains are neuroplastic, aren't they? We know the neurology in our brains is bendable, moldable, which is one of the reasons why the dark side of tech is it does change the way that your brains are. But in a positive, if it changes the way that your brains are, you're going to look at problems and situations from a different perspective. You're going to see different things. So, like, I guess if you could take it from a care perspective, a tech platform, you're going to be able to drill deeper into it and to see patterns and to see trends that we, in our own human experience, are not necessarily going to be able to see quickly, or might take me a week to sit there. So, say, for example, I put my hat on from donkeys years ago of going and doing an investigation. If I could put in what I needed to find into a tech platform and think differently with an open-minded perspective, a growth mind perspective of how can I achieve this in a different way, the platform might be able to, with some prompts, drill down and get the information quicker than I would if I had to sit there and read 7 days worth of daily records and then cross-reference that to risk assessments and cross-reference that to rotas and this and that and the other. So by having a growth mindset, a mindset of expansion, of where could I be if I did this? What's the goal after the goal? I'm open to what other options are there. It enables me to get maybe a greater outcome and quicker, and probably a more realistic one, where it's not necessarily biased by my own model of the world. So my perception of information is based on my thoughts and my feelings as an individual, yet tech is emotionless. It doesn't necessarily have a model of the world. So my new friend, AI, I'm having to educate it in the fact that of how I talk. So I say, good morning, lovely. And it says, good morning, lovely back to me, which I'm having to educate it that actually that's not how people would talk to me. It's very literal. So using tech, I think it helps you to be more creative and to expand your professional outcomes and personal ones. I mean, for me, I've got a platform where I've got I can track clients, as in, you know, where they are in the process. Have they had forms? Have they not? I can set up a funnel. I can run courses, and I can do all sorts of stuff through tech that gives me time.
Awesome.
Which is something we haven't got as people. We've added so much more in. We're so busy, aren't we? We haven't got this thing called time, this thing that's been created.
Yeah.
See, I agree with that, because time's one of the greatest commodities that we expect from everyone else, but are never happy to relinquish our own. And when we look at these tools that have been brought to market, it's all about saving time, but everyone's always too busy, even though they're using time-saving tools. But when you look at how AI and all of these other systems work from a growth perspective, contrary to popular belief, humans are more intelligent now than they've ever been. Kids are smarter. Even I feel smarter than I was. And having technology at your fingertips allows untapped expansion of knowledge. You know, people are able now to transition to different career pathways quicker because they can access online learning. Whereas historically they would have had to have located somewhere, you know, gone to a library, got books. And I think over the past 20 years, we've seen some major, major leaps. Obviously, the internet's a bit older than 20 years, but over the past 20 years to where it is now, and how it's connected that data to allow people to grow as an individual. Let's be fair. If you've got a question, and years ago, you would have either listened to your dad, your teacher, or gone and try and found it out yourself. Now you can actually go and look for that information in seconds and satisfy yourself with an answer based on, in a lot of the cases, research data. So it's accurate. And I feel that where we see the boosting of the creativity side, having tools that, for instance, schedule your day, like these smart AI planners that you can put in all of your meetings, and it looks at what time you sleep best and tries to coordinate what tasks you need to do throughout the day to where you're more productive, do sometimes work. But then equally, as you say, Lucy, AI needs training. It needs to learn you and how you operate as an individual, and can't apply a blanket approach. But when we look at professional side, data is king. Every organization, every business needs some element of data, whether that's customer data, service user data, and having that information and being able to scrutinize and prosecute that data as and when required is one of the biggest tools that a business owner or senior manager can have. Because, as you say, time and efficiency, especially when we're responding to things like incidents where someone may be at risk of harm, or we're suspecting something like abuse, years ago could have taken us a long time to trial through all of that data. Whereas if it's on digital systems nowadays, we could just reference and look for short key terms and stuff like that, and narrow that scope down. So it does make us a lot more productive, and it also makes us more responsive to change, to events that are happening. So society is becoming safer, I feel, with tech. As an individual, I feel a lot safer knowing that I have all of these controls, for instance, to help protect me from things like fraud with my banking. I have biometric ID now, so I can use Apple Pay. So we're seeing everyday tech advances that do make things more convenient for you. They help you grow quicker, because I know people think probably like, well, why is Apple Pay relevant? But let's be fair, if you want to go out and buy something to help you grow, like educational wise, years ago you would have had to have gone to an ATM, got the cash out, gone back to the shop. So it allows people to actively grow and adapt through society a lot quicker. But then equally, you have the negative where things are readily available. It's easy to go wrong with it. Finances is one of them ones where over the years people used to be really, really good with money, and that used to help them, and same as with businesses. But now you can spend online very quickly, and you have that piece of card that you can't always see the balance unless you're checking in. I mean, years ago, if you had cash, you could count it, right? So we do see all of the pros and the cons with it. But for businesses and individuals, I feel that tech is just there. It's going to stay, and it's helping people grow, especially with things like ChatGPT. That's helping people formulate more information, get it together. Although some would argue, ChatGPT and universities aren't really good friends at this moment in time. But yeah, I feel that technology will help enhance us as a species, as people. It helps us be better. It helps us understand people more. We're no longer kept in silos of our local area and what goes on. We're more exposed, and it allows more opportunity for people to grow and develop in general.
Mark?
Yeah, no, I think time is the biggest myth right after work-life balance. I think it's one of those things that we all speak about so often, but none of us ever seem to achieve getting more time, getting a better work-life balance. But it's very subjective to each person. So I think what your want of time is for you, Jack, could be very different to Lucy, could be very different to me, could be very different to Lee. And the same with work-life balance. I think it's how we utilize the tech that's available and what we want to get out of it. And I quite often say to my team, if you're looking for something, scroll in the App Store, just scroll down past that top 10, because they're all going to be kind of social media, the apps that they've gone viral, and look for the ones that are actually, productive for what you want. So actually, if you need something to, like a to-do list, look for a goal setting one. Don't look for the generic one that everybody's raving about right now, because the chances are it probably isn't the one that's fit for purpose for you. And I think it's around looking at what is available. I think there's some great creative apps out there that allows us to grow our minds, so many of us use Canva actually for that creativity side of things, and that side of our brain actually is fantastic, even if you're not doing anything with it. And I think it's just being, like Lucy said, it's being open to learning and having that new knowledge and ideas that flow. I think we all rely heavily on tech nowadays. I do often wonder if there was kind of a digital wipeout of some sort, what we would ever actually do, whether we would ever be able to go back to the days before we even had mobile phones and what that looks like. And yeah, I'd be back in year 6 because that's when they came out. And I wonder, and I'd love to know if we could fast forward, all of us are using, generative AI to help us. Does that information that we grab at a quick click of a button sink into our brain as much as maybe an old-fashioned cue card for things? So whilst we want to know the quick answer for something, we put it in and it gives it to us, whether actually we retain that as much as if we'd written it down and studied it a bit like we would have done for an exam or something. But yeah, I think it's being aware of what you want that tech for, and then being open to what is out there, listening to feedback, but going slightly off-piste in terms of where you find that information. Don't necessarily just follow the crowd.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's about, like you say, having that growth mindset or cultivating that growth mindset and then finding the right tools to fit into it. So I think I always like reading. I think when I'm traveling for work, when I'm taking the kids to Legoland, which is a few hours, I've switched from music now to either a podcast or a book. I mean, that's a great kind of like use case for how these tools are going to give us that growth mindset. And I think, yeah, there's just a lot of kind of tools out there, but it's about not getting kind of lost in the mix and just downloading 100 different apps just because, yeah, we can. It's just about being selective about those which are going to add to that growth mindset and just boost creativity.
I think there's also the element of, whilst tech grows our thinking, it is about the balance of it. So Jack, you alluded to something about your Apple Pay. Coming down the line is people will have the opportunity to have chips put in them if they want to, so that you don't have to have your passport. You don't have to go and have a mobile phone. The more phones that get stolen, the main town streets in London, with these motorbike people that come past and snatch your phone, the more people will be, well, I'm going to have a chip put in me. But then you've then got to think about the bigger picture of, well, you're easier to find, you're easier to track. In that moment, you're putting something out there into the universe, into the world, onto the internet. It's there. We know there's cases of people coming back and biting them on the backside because of what they've shared. You've mentioned about time. What if time was a construct? What if we get to the future and we evolve so much that actually we get that clever at manipulating time? And what if you say about being able to retain this information? Actually, I believe our brains have got all this. It's just that we filter it out, and we're so driven by our egos that we don't tap into the knowledge and the resources that we actually have. We're so busy doing stuff, following stuff, kind of being oblivious. We're so busy being in the past or in the future. We're not actually in the present, where we can really truly trust our unconscious minds of having a lot of information.
There's lots to unpack, isn't there? There's lots to unpack. So let's kind of just move on to the next one. So as technology continues to evolve, what ethical considerations should we keep in mind to ensure that it enhances rather than hinders our psychological and emotional development? Should we let Mark come in first? Let Mark go first on this one.
I think for me, the biggest thing has got to be transparency of what that data is being used for. And like Lucy just alluded to, around chips and data and having access to, I mean, that's not, far off the future. I was watching a video on TikTok in Hong Kong, I think it was, and they didn't even have a phone. It was all done through their fingerprint to to pay. So I think that is literally overnight waiting to happen. But yeah, I definitely think that we need a ethical review of some of the developers that have already started tech companies to actually make sure that what they're utilizing the data for is why they originally started utilizing it, because we know that actually data is money, and whether it's being, we see it every day, don't we, that they're selling off certain parts to make money in bits and pieces. So I definitely think that. I think from a user perspective, it's around, do we need to use that tech because everybody else is using it, or do we actually want to use it because it's going to benefit us? And I think we see that definitely with social media, with trends. And I think right now with maybe like Blue Sky, for example, with the amount of people leaving other social media to join that, actually, how many people are actually using Blue Sky? I mean, I'm on it for the caring view. The engagement is crap, but yet the users are going up every day. But the engagement isn't anywhere near maybe what Twitter, Facebook, and the others are like. And I think regardless of, however you're using tech, and I know we're talking about mental health today, is actually we are still human, and that face-to-face element and those relationships that we have with one another can't ever be forgotten just because there's a piece of tech that can replace it. I think we, like Lucy said, or Jack earlier in the episode, was actually it should be there to complement but not substitute.
I agree. I mean, I feel a lot of people use apps and tech for the sake of using tech nowadays. They look for a shortcut and a solution. And I feel that where we look at the ethical side of this, there's must be a duty on the providers of them software platforms to safeguard their users and not just what they do with the data, but also the person's well-being. With AI there that can detect things such as, foul language or racist terminology, surely there's got to be some AI out there that can detect the sentiment of a person and how they might be feeling with their posts and start to respond appropriately or signpost that person towards more help with targeted advertising. If someone's saying, for instance, I'm having a really bad day, I'm really struggling, why can't the AI algorithms pick up certain areas like, well, looks like this you're struggling, so why don't you have a look at some of these positive articles for today instead of feeding into the negativity with certain algorithms as well? Obviously, we also have to look at the side where when we look at the psychological / emotional side of how we grow as individuals, we are a very lessons learned species. Sometimes we have to go through a very difficult time to come out of it to realize that we've been through a difficult time. We get burned quite a lot. No one's perfect with this. Even as adults, we try and safeguard our children from this, but we put ourselves in harm's way. You see adults on social media living life, as Mark said earlier, with false perceptions, trying to take that perfect photo, as Lee said earlier, making sure everything's lined up just for someone to turn around and go, oh, that looks amazing. But realistically, you're trying to live your life by other people's standards, and they're sometimes unachievable. And this can hinder people in more ways than one. Obviously, if you're from a struggling background and you see people living a high life all the time, it's like it's rubbing it in your face that you're not successful. That can be really emotionally impacting to some people, especially when you've got someone who goes out 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, works hard for their family, to see that they feel like they're a failure, because obviously they see other people. Oh well, was it that Hawk Tur lady made 5 million for saying that phrase on a camera, and things like that can be quite emotionally damaging towards people. But I feel that when we use tech, there's got to be a greater emphasis on not just the end user being more, shall we say, hardened and resilient to the World Wide Web and the growing risks and trends online, but there's also got to be the duty on the platform providers to ensure there's adequate tools in there to safeguard, especially with social media platforms. I mean, AI could do so much more to help benefit individuals. We hear a lot about cyberbullying, comments online. AI could pick that up quite easy. And instead of banning someone, let's just say I've said a hurtful comment, why don't the AI report that post to me and say what you said could be interpreted as quite harmful? why don't you try and say something like this next time in a more constructive way? Instead of picking me up on my grammar and telling me I'm incorrect, why don't you tell me that my behavior could be perceived by someone as harmful? And then that might make me as a person develop further and be more accountable for my actions, as an example.
Just listening to you there, Lee, Jack, sorry, I just wrote down some notes. Was that you mentioned about protecting children and safeguarding and emotional damage, and it took me back to a piece that we mentioned earlier around how most of us are on social media for the likes and the comments and blah blah blah. Actually, I think we're in a really kind of weird place at the moment with social media, with parents and young children. The amount of times I see videos where they're making the child cry because they're saying something, there's that whole trend around making the child think that they've disappeared and they've turned into a ghost. Actually, the anxiety, the stress that brings on the child. There's so many videos where they're in a shop and they encourage the child to eat a sweet out of like the pick a mix, and then they're like, right, we're going to report you to the police because you haven't paid for it. And I think there's all these things that are happening, which, okay, they could be perceived as funny, but I do worry about the long-term emotional stability of those children that are going through that. Because if you're doing that on camera, God knows what you're doing in the build-up, because like we just said, that's your perfect shot. So you've probably tried that 10, 15 times to get that reaction. But we are in this very strange place at the moment in terms of tech. And I think actually, like you just said, if AI could warn you actually of the long-term implications that could have, or what you're doing isn't actually right, or it could report it safeguarding straight away, actually, I think that would be welcome, because I think people follow those likes and the engagement and they lose focus of the reality of life.
I mean, it's quite sad when, so you have these family photos, which are a once in a lifetime. You'd never grab that opportunity again. You've just taken the flash at the right time, and it's caught the perfect moment. And then there's, happy first day back at school, child. Now let me take 20 pictures of you. Stand by that wall. Let me get the ring light out. Check the light meter, just because I need a few people to say good luck today. And that's what it sort of boils down to. And we live in it's like an approval based society, that people feel they need the approval from other people online to socially validate what they're doing. And you touched on a fantastic point there, the long-term emotional harm to some of these children from some of these pranks and stuff like that could be untold, and lead to a lot of childhood trauma, which can obviously manifest in negative ways as adults. And once again, though, this is that the social media platform, or is that the parents, when it comes down to the ethics and how that one's balanced. And I think as a society, we just need to change from that I need approval from everyone else to I need to focus on myself. If other people like what I'm doing, fantastic, great, I'll share it with the world. But realistically, all I care about is my family, what's right for them, instead of what the other people might think of me.
Lucy, you seem like you're itching to jump in.
I don't know. Right. So I think there's so much we could talk about here. I completely agree with what you're saying. In fact, actually, I don't really look at. I leave my phone in the other room. I don't really look at social media. I don't have that thing called TikTok. I pay someone to do my Instagram and my Facebook because I don't want to be on it. Not interested. And as for LinkedIn, well, all I can say is it's been ridiculous the last 4 months. The reach has gone down. And the more that platforms build algorithms that are AI generated, and the people don't get the outcomes that they want, the more they'll look elsewhere. The more I think they'll look for personal interaction, the more that they'll push back, the more that people will get the ick when they're seeing this kind of content that's like, your child's really not going to thank you for that in the future. And the implications, I think we have to ask, for what purpose? When we think of any type of tech, when we think of any type of social media interactions, for what purpose are we using it? And when we've asked for what purpose, we then have to really then understand about the implications on us as individuals. The more we look for validation or gratification or polishing our ego online, the more we're going to feel empty as individuals. We're not going to be able to naturally produce those chemicals that we get when we're with one another, like things like oxytocin, and you get dopamine. You go out and you walk the dog and you kind of see the fresh kind of fields and that kind of stuff. That stuff's going to disappear. So I think there's that whole kind of ethical balance as individuals. And I have to say it, Jack, you said it, we only tend to change when we burnt the hard way. Is it that we have to clean up our mess and realise I've learnt this lesson? Is Earth the school that we come to learn the hard way? You could say. So is it that actually a generation are going to get impacted massively by social media for the next generations to turn around and say that's not happening? Why do I say that? I think about my son. I say he's nearly 25, and then I think about my daughter, who will be 21 soon enough. And there's a difference. My son grew up with a computer that was in the kitchen, the family kitchen computer, and he had me around when he was on the computer. He didn't have a mobile phone until he was probably nearer 14. My daughter had access to an iPad much younger and a phone at a younger age because I was back in full-time work. The impact on her from computers and social media has been dramatic. So I know when my son becomes a father, he is going to have far stricter boundaries around technology use with his children, because that's how his model of the world has been formed, because he can see the damage it's having and he can compare. Whereas for me, I grew up with my information coming from a book in the library. I can remember the first computers, I used to play Frogger, and I used to have to put a cassette in this machine and press play for it to come up on that thing called a screen. I can remember the unveiling of the BBC B computer that my parents bought. It was almost like they'd found the Holy Grail and this mystical object landed, in our lounge, and it was like, oh, look at what this is. So we know we're going to massively, massively change. And I think there's a lot around people having to, there's the ethical element, is that we have to inform ourselves. So you've mentioned Blue Sky. It's interesting, isn't it? When you go to join Blue Sky, you can either join and have your data on their server, or you can join and have the data on your server. So do they own your data, or do you own your data? Well, I haven't got a server, so they're going to be owning my data if I do Blue Sky, aren't they? How many more of us are going to get fed up with being shadow banned because we're talking about stuff that's a little bit out there? Mindset, alchemy, woo-woo stuff, spirituality, it gets shadow banned. And then we have to look at world policies. We know that there are agendas that are being brought in, which will be far stricter on what people can put out there. Agenda 2030, they're so much stricter on what can go out on social media. So yeah, there's going to be and I think it has to come back to us as individuals, and you have to educate yourself. I wouldn't start by believing everything that you're told. I would go off and do your research. I would go and look at different perspectives. I would go and find out what aligns with your values as an individual, what works for you. No one's putting a chip in me, because I'd probably be allergic to it. I'd reject it. My body would say, I'm not walking around scratching the side of my face because the chip's itching and my body wants to reject it. I'd be there with a knife trying to cut the thing out. And if that means I can't get on a plane to go abroad, I'm okay with that. That's what I've reflected on. That's what I've thought about. That aligns with my beliefs. I think that's something that we all have to do. And obviously these parents that are sharing videos that make the others of us who've got more knowledge, more insight, because we've got more experience, we've got older children, we might come from a different value set, make us go, oh, I don't think I'd have shared that. They're coming from a different model of the world than what we're coming from. So I think it's about understanding it and not judging it, and trying to say, okay, maybe this, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You can, and I think we'll get to a place where we can see tech and we can see individuals, and we can actually hold a space for respecting somebody else's opinion whilst having our own opinions as well. I think we might actually get to that place in the next 20 years.
Let's hope, hey.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, this has been a really fascinating episode. We are just about out of time, so I will just hand over to Jack to see if he's got any closing thoughts, any quick closing thoughts.
No, I just want to say it's been a really good conversation. Thank you very much for joining. It's been a pleasure to have you on here, Lucy. But no, like usual, it's been a pleasure with Mark and yourself, Lee, as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Mark, any closing thoughts?
No, I think it's been a great episode. I think it's been very thought-provoking. I think there's many avenues that we could have dived down and gone down the rabbit hole. But yeah, no, thank you very much, Lucy, for joining us.
Yeah, I think we definitely need a part 2. So I'm hoping that Lucy will be good enough to come back on and we can, dig into a little bit more, because there's lots of kind of like segues that we could go on. But yeah, right out of time. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will be back next week with another guest.
Also, leave us a good review, feedback on Spotify. It helps us grow.
Yeah, awesome. Now I just need to try and find how to stop this.
Again.